Okay, Chair, when you're ready, we're now live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Housing Task and Finish Forum on the 9th of September 2021. I am your chair, Councillor Dan Ledger. Based on the decision of the extraordinary meeting of the Council on the 26th of July, I'd like to remind both members and public attending or watching that this Council has delegated much of its decision-taking powers to our senior officers. This is for a short period of time only, until the 17th of January 2022, and is due to concerns relating to COVID risk. Consequently, this meeting is being held remotely and on a consultative basis only. We will continue to adhere as closely as possible to the procedural rules detailed in our Constitution. However, where this meeting would normally have decided a matter, it will now make recommendations to a senior officer. The officer will then take the recommendation into account when making their decision. The meeting can be viewed live online and will be recorded, so please bear with us throughout the meeting. Therefore, may I remind colleagues to be careful with their language, and the code of conduct applies throughout our meeting. We reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this meeting is dependent on an internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. If we're unable to reconnect within 15 minutes, the meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. Please check our committee page on our website for further details. Could colleagues please ensure your microphones is muted when you're not speaking? This will help with background level noises. Could you also keep your points short and not interrupt when someone else is speaking? Should you wish to make a comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any member of the public who wishes to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website at eastdevon.gov.uk. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you're present, please then mute your microphone again. Thanks very much. And yeah.
So I'll start with you, Chair. Councillor Ledger.
Present. Thank you, Alethea.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present. Sorry about the dog.
Councillor Blakey.
Present.
Councillor Davey. Councillor Davey. So you're on mute, Councillor Davey. I'll come back to Councillor Davey. Councillor Hall.
Present, and hello from sunny Millway.
Councillor Moulding.
Present.
And Councillor Pook.
Present.
Thank you. So I can confirm that we're quorate today, Chair.
Thank you very much. So agenda item 1 is public speaking. I understand that there's no public wishing to speak today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. So agenda item 2 are minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has any comments, could you please raise your electronic hands? If I see no hands raised, we'll take those as agreed. No, so I see no hands raised, so they're agreed. Agenda item 3 is apologies.
Okay, I've received apologies from Councillor Parr, Councillor Hayward and Councillor Rylance.
Thank you very much. So we move on to agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Again, this will be done by a roll call. Then over to you, Alethea.
Okay, so if you could please state the nature of your interest, be helpful. So Councillor Ledger, please.
None from me, thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
None.
Councillor Blakey.
None, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Davey.
I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor, but I'm not sure if that's particularly relevant to anything, but I suppose it might be if some housing was to take place in Exmouth.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hall.
Okay, just in case anything gets covered, Devon County Councillor for the Exmouth Division. I used to have an allotment on the Millway Rise estate. If Millway Rise gets mentioned, and prior to COVID, I was the chairman of the user group at the East Devon District Council owned Millway Rise Community Hall. And there is a potential of emerging men's shed in the Millway Rise area. And so that could be in the area of building communities other than building houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moulding
None.
and Councillor Pook.
It's a personal interest. I'm involved in the construction industry. I'm also chair of a community land trust, and I'm a community-led housing advisor.
You got that, Alethea?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, all done. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 5, matters of urgency. So there are none. Agenda item 6, confidential and exempt items. Again, there are none. So we move on to the main part of the agenda. Agenda item 7, building for the future. And it's over to Tim Child to receive a report. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. This is a short agenda item. Within your report pack, you have a document prepared by Homes for the South West. It's really sort of an information document, but it does quite helpfully set the scene for the discussions that I'm sure will take place in respect to the final agenda item. So I'm just going to pick up on a few of the points picked up within this document, and then obviously we can have a wider discussion, or other officers can come in if necessary. So documents produced by Homes of the South West. Homes for the South West are a coalition of some of the largest housing associations across the wider South West. I see they state that they have 245,000 homes within their portfolios. So between them, a huge control in the market. The document emphasises the importance of a safe, secure and warmer home. It's not just about numbers of homes, it's the right homes, and with a particular focus on the individuals then occupying those homes. Document sets out the importance of growing the housing stock for social and affordable rented homes, and how across the South West, with the right support from the government, and I believe that, that's quoted as £4 billion required, combined, they can deliver 25,000 homes. As I said, this across the wider South West over the next 5 years. Through a £4 billion investment programme. It doesn't actually state, I don't think, quite how much of that is dependent on grant. But it's only a £4 billion programme. Interestingly enough, and again, this will be relevant to our later discussions, and particularly the next agenda item regarding Exeter City Living, they are committed to building 25% of the additional stock using modern methods of construction. The bit that really jumped out to me from the document is the section on page 11, and it's about building more homes, and it's in particular around the power of house building in terms of COVID-19 recovery. And for me, that really jumped out because that resonates with lots of what we as a council have been talking about. So as I said, page 11, building more homes, it creates jobs. I think that goes without saying, and there's some detail in the document there about exactly what economic impact that has. It reduces financial pressure on the Treasury. I will just read this bit just to explain the context of that. For every £1 spent on construction, there's 56p benefit to the Exchequer from increased tax revenues and reduced benefits payments as the activity stimulates employment growth. Thirdly, it supports the levelling up agenda, providing training, skills and opportunities and supporting the establishment of new and innovative industries. And then the last of the points being that it increases confidence. Building the confidence of consumers, investors and developers will be key to the economic recovery. And I think those 4 themes are really, really important in terms of how we as a council contribute in perhaps a small way, but contribute towards that bigger national journey. And I think that will be really important when we get to John Golding's report, the final item on the agenda. So as I said, brief item, it was really sort of information document, but perhaps sort of setting the scene really. So I probably don't really have anything more to say on that. Other officers may do, and if so, perhaps they wanted to come in. Otherwise, obviously happy to take questions.
Thanks very much for that, Tim. Does any other officer wish to come in at that point? John?
Chair,
over to you.
Chair, could I comment, please? Only very briefly, you'll be pleased to know. So this popped into my inbox a few weeks ago, and I think, as Tim said, it really resonates with the sort of things that we're trying to do, this being on a really big scale. So I think this consortium of housing associations have put this together partly as a pitch to Homes England for more funding. You know, they're saying that we're out there, we've got a huge track record, we can up our game significantly. But as Tim has pointed out, they've got very similar values to us. Quite a few of those partners we work with, so Live West, we know, got a base in our area, huge registered provider, but also Sovereign we work with, Magna we work with, Stonewater and Westwood over. So these have been either current or past partners of ourselves. So huge ambition is stated here, but good for the TAF, I think, in terms of context. Nice and glossy. They've obviously put quite a lot of money behind this publication, but it certainly sets out their stall for the purposes of, I think, primarily Homes England, who are the major funder for this work, and probably the government department, MHCLG, that also oversee distribution of funds for affordable housing development. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Does any member wish to comment or ask any questions at this time? Councillor Davey.
Yeah, so John, are they asking anything of us, or is this really just for our information because they're going to do it anyway? Are they asking for our support or a financial contribution or land to be made available? But you know, what are they after?
Through you, if I may, Chair.
Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, they're not after anything directly from us. They want us to be partners, so we do support these associations in different ways in terms of our enabling role and trying to facilitate their perhaps planning applications with housing needs evidence and those sorts of things. But so there's no specific ask. They're just putting out there that they are quite large and active developers that will be coming to our area to deliver some of these 20 to 50,000 homes that they're proposing.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Blakey, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is just an observation, and I doubt that we've got the answer to this, and there may be reasons why it can't happen. But the one thing that this report doesn't mention is actually engaging with smaller local builders to build these new homes. There is a tendency amongst certainly the principles of this report to deal with mass market builders. And I do appreciate that there are economies of scale that are brought to bear on this. But it has to be said that there is a bit of a history of some fairly poor quality buildings being transferred to the housing providers. And the major chunk of the economic benefit on the construction of those houses then gets exported to other parts of the country or the world. Notably the area within the M25, it's sort of fly your money out of the regions and send it in there. So as an observation and perhaps as a comment back to them is, could they please consider engaging with local builders on smaller developments where perhaps better quality buildings are being constructed, and that actually the economic benefits that they're talking about here don't necessarily all accrue directly to the Treasury, but can actually spill around the local economy as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Blakey. I think officers predominantly agree with that. So a lot of nodding.
I think so, Chair. I can see a reference on page 14 to contribute £1 billion to the local economy. Not quite sure how that might break down, but Councillor Blakey is right. A lot of these programmes rely on volume and economies of scale, and as a consequence, that generally entails or includes partnerships with the large 4 or 5 national house builders. But more than happy to feed back some views. We do have contacts with people on in the consortium. Happy to feed back our desire to try and ensure that where they're tendering perhaps on smaller sites that aren't already land banked by the big developers, that they encourage local contractors to compete for that work.
John, am I correct in saying that a lot of these partners are still part of, they're part of Advantage Southwest, the procurement provider, and that's something that you could possibly lobby through?
Yeah, certainly Live West are I know for a fact, are a partner in Advantage Southwest, our procurement consortium, for those that are not familiar with that. Yeah, we can have that, encourage that dialogue through that route as well.
Thanks very much. So, Councillor Armstrong, over to you, please.
It's just for clarification, Chair. I'm rather confused because my document only goes up to page 8 and people have referred to page 11 and page 14. And I'm just wondering if I'm just looking at it wrong. Or
It's under the agenda pack, Councillor. I think page 11 would be the equivalent of probably page 3 of what you're looking at.
So when you say it's under the, hang on a minute, sorry about this, everybody.
If it helps, and if I may, Chair.
I'm clicking on item 7, building for the future.
Yeah.
And that's what the document comes up to page 8.
Yes, but then there's a further agenda pack which contains every single page on the agenda.
The agenda reports pack, is it that I should be looking at? Right.
And then it's page 11 of that, which was discussed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that then, everybody. Okay.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, Megan, if you look on the left-hand side of the page,
yeah,
you'll see the page numbers there.
I've been into the pack bit now, and I've got, it goes up to 21. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It just really was confusing going into the first one. Okay, thank you. Okay. So,
members with no other hands raised, are we happy just to? Is it that we endorse to note the report? We're still getting used to these new terminology.
Happy to go with you, Chair, but I can find some appropriate wording that you accept the report. It's informative.
Yeah. May I, Chair? I'd suggest endorse.
Thank you very much, Debbie.
No problem at all, Chair.
So I'll move that from the Chair that we just endorsed the report. And could members just give us a green tick or a red cross? So I see that's unanimous.
Yeah,
so
we have 6 green ticks there, Chair.
Thank you very much. So moving on to agenda item 8, which is feedback of the working group meeting on the 6th of September with Exeter City Living. And again, it's over to you, Tim Child, to present.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, yes, meeting took place between the TAF member working group and Exeter City Living on the 6th. That was Monday this week. So obviously, because of timescales, it's obviously a verbal update rather than a written report. Really good meeting, lots to say. I'm going to try and sort of summarise just the main themes that came out of that meeting, but conscious that there were a number of other officers there and a number of members there. I think perhaps once I've introduced it, there may be sort of specific aspects that others might want to come in on. But as sort of a general introduction, so yeah, it took place on Monday, Exeter City Living. From our perspective, we had councillors Ledger, councillor Armstrong, councillor Pook, and councillor Moulding present. I think that's all. In terms of officers, Simon Davey, John Golding, Joe Garford, and myself. We'd approached Exeter City Living specifically because of their track record of delivering, well, two things really: delivering in volume within Exeter over the last sort of 10 or so years, but also their focus, their emphasis entirely on passive house as a design, as a specification. So I suppose they were really two reasons we went to them. In terms of who we met from Exeter City Living, no, it was a virtual Zoom meeting, I should say. We met with Emma Osmondson, who is their CEO, seconded in from Exeter City Council. And we met Robin Thorne, who is the Development Director of Exeter City Living, and Thomas Gartner, who is an external architect. He's a consultant who was extremely passionate on passive house and about providing the right environment for people to live in, with a particular focus around climate change. As an organisation, they've delivered, and there were lots of numbers mentioned, so other officers may come in with different numbers, and if they do, I'm happy to be corrected. But as I understand it, 100 passive house schemes in Exeter. Obviously, some are schemes, some are individual units. So they've delivered many units. They've also, as an example, they've got an extra care facility that they've delivered. That's to passive house standards, and perhaps not relevant to this meeting, but of wider interest, a new leisure centre, again to passive house standard. They have a pipeline, a very ambitious pipeline of 650 units, with some being private rented, although the market for that is changing, but others they sell directly onto the HRA. So, and they are it's worth saying they're a separate development company, but they are the preferred developer of the HRA for their social and affordable units, and then go back into the HRA. I think it's the affordable units in their instance. So I think one of the questions that we asked of them is, okay, you've built lots of units. How have you managed to do that? And the response was, well, they as an organisation have two advantages. The first, they have the land in Exeter through both the HRA, typically through infill sites, but also through acquiring land on the open market, although their emphasis very strongly was on HRA infill sites. And there wasn't really a particularly, although there was an appetite, but generally on HRA sites rather than focusing too much on commercial sites. And the two, so it was the availability of land. Secondly, and I think this is really key for our discussion and our subsequent discussion in a minute, money from the PWLB, so funding through Public Works Loan Board. They are set up as a TECL company, which means that they can borrow from Exeter City Council. As an organisation, they've built lots and lots of units, but it's interesting, and I was talking to them, I assumed they had a large staff base to deliver on that, but they don't. they only have 2 employees. In fact, their CEO is seconded from Exeter City Council. They have 2 employees, a development director and a office manager. All other services are procured through contractors and through consultants, many of which they've been working with for the last, I think it was the last 14 years, they said, since their inception. And they believe that arrangement to be more cost effective and also less risky. And I think that model they intimated may change over time, but certainly in terms of being a new organisation, that was the better model for them. Their model, what they build, is very specific. They build to passive house standard, so highly energy efficient buildings, which has obviously a big impact on running costs. There was an example they gave of one particular property that had been occupied for a number of years. I think they were intimating it's probably 5 or so years, where they do the surveys for their residents, and that particular resident in that, I think it was 4 or 5 years, had never needed to put the heating on, or if they had, it was once. I think it might have been once. And that goes to show the benefit of design and designing and building to a passive house standard, and clearly a huge benefit then to the residents in those properties in terms of their overall occupation costs. Because passive house is slightly more expensive, and they were suggesting 5 to 6% above average build costs for non-passive house units, so 5 to 6% more expensive to build, and therefore because of that they were needing, through their business model, very much to be let as affordable units through the HRA rather than as social units. When you actually factor in the significant reduction in running costs, although there might be a affordable rent, not a social rent, actually the occupation costs for the tenant is comparable with that of a social rented property. But that was really interesting because when we talk about the demand, we often talk about the desire to deliver on social, but we tend to look at it purely from a rent perspective, and this sort of brought in that sort of that added dimension really, which is key to potentially making something that might not stack up financially to the developer, to the authority, actually stack up. So a bit more just briefly about passive house. So and I suspect there'll be a whole range of questions about passive house that come out of this, but we can pick those up as questions if there are. But some of the advantages of building to the passive house standard, accredited standard, yes, a little bit more expensive up front, but 60-year warranties on windows, 60-year warranties offered on render, and other key components. So it does, it's the right thing to do for the resident, certainly, but also for the developer, or the developer strip, more the landlord, I suppose, it makes financial sense. So just a bit about them as an organisation. They're set up as a development company, so that they can build open market accommodation. We asked them a question about that, and if they were only building social and affordable, then yes, indeed, they could have done that through the HRA, but because of the market element, they needed to be set up as a separate development company. They also, and it's interesting because obviously we're focused at Exeter City Living, you think Exeter, and yes, they are building obviously in Exeter. However, they are beginning to, or I say beginning to, there was a very strong message that they, over quite a number of years, have helped others. Helped others build, but in particular helped others build passive house schemes and offered their sort of support and their experience. We had a really good sort of, as part of that meeting, their external architect, who was one of the most passionate individuals. Architects often are, but he was one of the most passionate individuals I've come across in relation to passive house, climate change, and providing a comfortable and healthy living environment for the residents. Yeah, they're happy to work with other authorities, and they were very, very willing to share lots of information with us, and indeed offered to speak with us again should we wish to. They dropped in that they're doing a piece of work currently for Teignbridge on a formal basis, where they are providing some consultancy type support to Teignbridge. So that was sort of an added dimension, and potentially sort of an opportunity for East Devon to follow suit, I suppose. I'm just going to pick up now, just to finish off, 4 or 5 key themes that I took from that working group meeting. I think, and these really sort of sum it all up really. Firstly, definition of affordable. They see definition of affordable being running costs and rent, which goes back to what I've said about the social, about being comparable to a social rented property, and that's really key. And that's something that's quite easy to sort of to forget. Secondly, the model, their development model, it's quite complex, but actually at the same time it's really straightforward. With the arrangements that they have set with Exeter City Council, or the governance that goes into that, and a very clear business plan and objectives. So you listen to them, it's not difficult, but a lot of work went in early on to building up that business case, the clear objectives, and getting the support and trust from those within Exeter City Council, both senior officers, but also the elected members. Thirdly, the need for strong and informed and educated leadership, and the importance of, over time, building relationships, trust, and experience. And that doesn't happen overnight, but there was an acknowledgement that development does require a degree of risk. It can be managed. It's not something to shy away from. It can be managed, but you do need to have that trust, those relationships, and the experience in place to enable that to happen. The fourth takeout from that session was climate change and the dire position we're in. As I said, the architect very passionate on that. And then finally, they referred to it as the 3 C's, control, change, and commercialisation. And this was about what they can do, Exeter City Living. So they can control, they're not there to deliver housing in a way that others would. They're there to fill a gap in the market. They're there to take forward schemes that might otherwise not be taken forward. So controls, intervention, I suppose, change, the ability to bring about change, and also commercialisation. So yeah, that was the session. It's a really, really good session. There was much more than what I've just set out. So I see Simon already has his hand up. There might be Simon and other officers who want to come in, and indeed members. So yeah, happy to open it out to others, Chair.
Very much for that, Tim. Really, really well summarised for what was probably a 2.5-hour meeting, with a lot involved in it, and it was a really interesting one. Simon, can I bring you in at that point just to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just echo what you said. That was a very good summary of a long presentation with lots of details. There was just one element I wanted to sort of highlight, just to be clear, in terms of what they were saying and what I've looked up since. The model that they've got running isn't actually, or that significantly different to what we'd set up as the company to start with, and the principles. So in terms of setting up a company, PWLB loan, I'm talking the finance side, PWLB loans, an interest charge on top of that, so an element of profit, if you like, going back to the council in terms of the loan rate being charged. And the idea of sort of interfering with the market to provide affordable or better housing. The big difference is their business plan assumed losses for at least the first 5 years. And that is just looking at their accounts. I mean, they are in quite a significant loss situation, but that's what they accepted in terms of building up their business plan. So how that's funded is by loan from the council. So the council's loaning them capital sums. I think they've got 9.5 million approved, with another 16.5 million in play as the next approval. And they're using that obviously for development, but also to help run that company. So I think that's quite interesting as well, in terms of looking at that overall picture and the finances.
Thanks very much for that, Simon.
Thanks.
Joe, can we come to you now? And I need to compliment you on that feature wall. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, especially for you guys, you see, especially for you. No more dull Zoom meetings. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think really one of my points would be reiterating Simon's, is the fact that actually it was a fascinating meeting on Monday, really enjoyed it. For me, I left with probably more questions than I started with. I'd like to meet with them again to understand their financial modelling with that. I also am not completely clear on how they manage the transfer of land and then properties on practical completion. That seems a little bit confused for me. But I think there's a clear link here between this meeting and the one that we had with TDA. And that is exactly what Simon's just been saying, is the fact that both of those organisations took the very brave step to invest a significant amount of money and allow it to be a loss leader for 5 years. That entails quite a lot of bravery, especially in this current economic climate. But yeah, those were the kind of, and as Tim was saying, most of my other takeaways were the same as Tim's really. I was really interested in the affordable rent model using the passive house standard. Very, very difficult to get new developments to stack up using social rent. But we might stand a chance. But I guess our Achilles heel is that we do not have the land holdings available to us that Exeter do. But yeah, absolutely fascinating. I would love to go back and speak to them again and pick their brains a bit more about the actual nuts and bolts of their financial modelling of that and how they manage those political bits of swapping properties between the HRA, the council, and then over to the development company and then back in again. Because I think if that's not done quite rightly, then actually we could come a cropper. But yeah, that was it from me. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It'd be interesting to see as well in a few years' time, with all the long guarantees that they have. Obviously, Tim said it in his report, 60 years for Windows, 60 years for render, and the such. Like, if we were to start incorporating that into the HRA, what that would affect, would that have on, say, reactive maintenance and the budgets they're in? And exactly, it would be huge. So I think it really did hit a lot of the key criteria that the council was trying to push through its council plan, and just key objectives really. Obviously, poverty was really enshrined in a lot of the things that they're doing with the affordable rents and making it as affordable as possible, even if it's not social rent. Climate change and everything in between. It was really interesting.
lot of our aspiration points, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think what I'll do, I'll take the other 3 members who are actually at the meeting just so that they can give any of their ideas, and then we'll bring in the rest of the members. So, Megan, can I bring you in at this point, please?
Yes, just a quick one. Yeah, I agree with Tim and Joe. It was an excellent meeting. I really enjoyed it, and even though it was long, it didn't seem that long because it was so interesting and a lot of information. I tried to write as much down of it as I could. But I just want to get back to I just feel being a bit, I always question things, I know I do, but this business about the affordable housing, I would like to go back to them. And one of the things I'd like to ask is, what evidence do they have that an affordable house on their standards and therefore on passive house standards, and therefore a decrease in energy costs, how does that equate? Have they got figures to back that up? How does that equate to a social rent? It's all right saying it, and I'm sure they're probably right, but I just want some evidence. I want some evidence of that before we just assume, oh yes, affordable rent, that's fine. They're going to save on all the heating costs. How much are they going to save? How does that equate to a social rent? So that's my one big question amongst the others, but that stuck out for me because I was the one that asked about social housing in the meeting and the fact that they didn't seem to go into social housing, and that's the answer I got. And at the time I thought, yeah, that sounds okay. And it probably is, but I just want some evidence of that. And therefore that's at least one reason why I'd like to go back to them and see that in black and white. Okay, thank you. But it was an excellent meeting, and I agree with everything that Tim said and the 5 main points, but certainly worth following it up. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, Megan. Andrew, can I come to you next, please?
Thank you, Chair. It was interesting, and Simon Davey did allude to the fact that they are very much commercially driven, and they actually stated their remit is to generate a profit. And I just wonder how that would accord with comments that were made at last night's cabinet meeting, where there was concern about outsourcing from members of the controlling group. And I just wonder whether the two things actually fit together.
I think, Andrew, what they were saying at the last meeting was it's profit for purpose, and that's the difference. It's not commercial profit; it's profit for purpose and social good, and that's the slight difference that I would put between the two. So, Councillor Pook, over to you.
Thank you. I've got my own points, but just addressing Megan's. That was fairly succinctly said, but I think they said the typical heating costs were about £1,500 a house per annum, whilst there with reduced they could go down to about 50 to 100. So you're instantly taking £100 a month off rental costs there, and that's then it's across other things. So I'd have no problems arguing those figures. And just going back to Councillor Moulding's comments, I think we've got to remember what the object of this is to deliver houses, and that comes into what I was going to come to is the main point I picked up from it is that it's very focused, very commercial. You know, they got a job to do, and they approach that as the single entity. They report back to the council, and they're following a council criteria, council policy. But when they act as a very tight commercial organisation, 2 people running X millions of pounds of houses and development. And basically falls in, which I've always thought, is that our council housing company, if we do it, it must be a small standalone, wholly owned company with a very commercial management, building, leaning on consultants, etc. when you need it, but almost acting as a developer. Because if we try and develop houses as a council, because of all the way we have to go around things and we have all the procedures and things, we're going to never do it. But if we have a council housing company which is able to actually look commercially at opportunities, I can see no reason why we can't go ahead. And so I was just pleased to see them as a good example.
Thank you, Councillor Poog. I think one of the things that came out of it was the reporting lines that they've got, where obviously they've got stakeholders, which I believe it's the leader, the deputy leader, and the chief exec are all at one reporting group. They have an annual report that goes to full council for approval, and I believe they had quarterly reports as well that went along the way. But it is almost that councillors do have a decisions to make and influence within the company, but the company is allowed to act when it needs to. And that was one of the important things that I thought that really came across well. So, Councillor Faithful, we'll go to you next, please. Oh, sorry, apologies. John, I've just seen your hand up. Do you want to come in at that point?
If I might, Chair, because I think it's pertinent. So without wishing to repeat what other people have said, but one thing that really came across to me very, very strongly when I asked the question about land supply is that all of their schemes, their land suppliers come from the city council. They've not competed in the market at all, which is a problem that we've experienced. And they've taken brave decisions to build on car parks, leisure land, and associated land. But obviously, they weighed up the issues and felt that housing is the priority. So that was a big difference for me, and quite a telling or key part of their success, I feel. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, John. I think we're going to be looking to Tim to see how many depots he can pull out of the back of the sofa by the end of this. Councillor Faithful, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Passive House, I've looked on the website before, and there's surprisingly few actually showing up on their website as being registered. And I'm wondering, I mean, whether it's the website's not up to date, or whether are they fully registered, or because there's also different levels of Passive House. There's the full Passive House, and there's the, I forget what you call it, is a Passive House Plus or something like that. And it also is, I believe there's other organisations. Passive House is an organisation, and there's other similar organisations which might be, I don't know, alternative or easier, economical to work with. I don't know. Have we looked at any of those sort of possibilities?
I think Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, but all of their schemes were Passive House certified. From I think they've got 8 different generations of schemes, haven't they? And every single one was Passive House. It goes all the way back to 2010, I believe.
Yeah, Chair, if I can just come in. Yes, all Passive House certified. And there was a very useful bar chart, I think it was from recollection, which showed running actions. So you build your property to a Passive House accredited standard. You also, other types of properties, you build to the relevant standard. Prior to building those properties, there will be assessments done on how much it will cost to heat those properties and, well, how to provide energy to those properties. And it was really interesting that for non-Passive House properties, actually, the estimations were quite a long way out from the actuals. And that's because the standard isn't there. So every property, like you can say you're going to do a sustainable building, but actually every building is slightly different. But with Passive House, it's what it does what it says it does in the box. So it is what it is. And actually, therefore, the deviation is very, very small. So therefore, they absolutely, were convinced by the formal Passive House model. And by doing it that way, they as a developer, the HRA as the end user, and then the occupier all have confidence that it stacks up financially. And I think that's the advantage over a formally accredited model, rather than just saying, we'll build a house and we'll do it in a sustainable way, because it's actually very difficult to formally calculate what does that mean for energy bills, if that makes sense.
Thanks very much, Tim. So we'll move on to Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the passive house model has been around for decades, I think. So I think it's very well worked out now. I'm quite interested in what the carbon footprint of passive houses is in the construction as compared to other types of construction, because it is very much materials led, isn't it? And that's one of the specifications, that you have to have materials of a certain standard. I think you mentioned 100 passive house schemes in Exeter. I just wondered how many houses that actually translates into, or is that 100 houses? And also what type of housing they're building. Is it mostly apartments, or I'm guessing it's not your classic 5-bedroom house favoured by builders. I'm also interested in how they're using who they're using as constructors, because the number of constructors able to build passive houses is fairly limited, I think. So I wonder who they're using, and going back to Kevin's point about local builders, whether any of those are local or relatively local. And finally, I'm interested in how they behave in hot weather. We hear a lot about the heating. What are they like for cooling? I kind of suspect that probably, like a thermos flask, they work well either way. But I'd be interested in that, because you do hear that a little bit, and I've even heard it in Green Party meetings from people saying, yeah, it's all very well insulating all these houses, but what about when it's really hot? And you think, no, I don't think it's going to work that way, but I'd be interested in that. So yeah, just a few questions there, but how many houses are they actually delivering, and what sort of housing? Who are they using as constructors, and how do they perform in hot weather? Oh, and what the carbon footprint is like for the actual construction.
I don't know if Tim and John can answer most of those questions, but just from a personal point of view and outside of council, I actually worked on one of the schemes for Exeter City Living. They do a range of schemes. So the ones I worked on was a row of terrace houses. They've done complete flats of over 30 premises in the flats, but it's all site dependent on obviously whether it's an infill site from the HRA. If they're purchasing land, it's very much site dependent, and then you get the tenure and mix from that. And they utilize the housing enablers to obviously look at the housing need of an area, and that derives what they need to produce at the end. On the more technical questions, I'll defer to Tim and John at that point.
Thank you. The only question I was able to answer was the one Dan had answered, just because we were shown some photographs of some examples, so I knew there were some houses. So yeah, no, I think it's a fairly good mix, and as Dan said, it depends on the actual site. The other questions that you asked, to be honest, weren't questions that we posed at that meeting. Yes, there was a section on passive house, but a lot of the meeting was more about the development side of it. But they are all really, really good questions. We've obviously noted the questions. We've obviously got that contact now through them. So I'll liaise with Alethea just to make sure I've got the questions correctly, and then we'll put them back to Exeter City Living and see what answers, because I think the answers will be interesting to a lot of us. So if that's okay, I can't answer because we just didn't raise it. I suspect this will be the same answer for John, but don't want to put words in his mouth.
Over to you, John, if you can add anything.
Yeah, so we have some experience of passive house construction, albeit in retrofit. So we understand when we did it a few years ago, we purchased a 3-storey terrace property in St Andrews Road in Exmouth, and we retrofitted that to passive house standards. And it was a bit of a nightmare, I have to say, because the standards are so high and an old Victorian building is not easily retrofitted, so it was expensive. But the standards of heating and cooling, Ollie's point on cooling, according to our tenants, again, they're not using their heating systems and those, so it's very, very effective. It is a standard that's owned by a German company, but it's perceived across the industry, the sector, as being a good high standard of both building insulation and construction. And we can send the technical details or report them to the next TAF if required. There are other standards out there that achieve similar high standards of energy efficiency and low carbon construction. They're competing things, and I think Exeter City Living said that they always keep an eye on the updates. It's a standard that's constantly being updated, and will take a view as to whether that's the most suitable standard going forward. I'd be honest, I don't understand all the intricacies of some of the technical details around air tightness and ventilation, particularly important in creating a passive house. But if the TAF want to come and revisit that, we can provide some of the technical details and perhaps an expert to talk through it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, John. Moving on to Councillor Blakey, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a little bit of a point of information. The Passive House Standard was actually created in 1991 in Germany, and was a reaction to the fact that at that time Germany produced an awful lot, most of its energy from coal-fired power stations. So fossil fuel consumption was enormous. Anyway, that aside, the extra cost, the on-cost of a new build up to Passive House Standard in the UK is reckoned on several sites that I've read to be between 20 and 25% of a standard building regs construction, which means that if you're going to assume that your construction cost is 200k for standard building regs, you're needing an extra 40 to 50,000 pounds per dwelling to build it. Now, I'm all for it, because I think that building to high standards is something that everybody should aspire to, and we've had far too long, probably 40 years of builders, particularly mass market builders, getting away with building houses to not particularly good standards. And I think that the environmental argument, above all else, is one of those things that can push that up a long way. But the savings in hard cash terms are probably for the residents in those properties still currently only in the region of £1,000 or £1,100 per year. So there's that, and this comes back to what Councillor Pook's saying. So I think that the payback, if you like, the financial benefit is a long way off into the future. We're having to look 40 to 50 years into the future to get a financial return on using passive houses as the base standard. That's not to say we shouldn't do it, because we should be investing for the future, but let's be under no illusion it's going to cost an awful lot of money. And as John Golding said, the cost of doing these jobs, particularly if you're going to retrofit, is absolutely enormous. So the upshot is that an awful lot of, I think, of money is going to have to be set aside for this, and one of two things is going to happen. Either the cash cost is going to go up, or the number of dwellings being built is going to go down. Difficult choices to be made. We obviously have targets for new dwellings within this district, as with others. And whether those houses are going to be built by some kind of public body or through the private builders, I think, is something again that we would have to debate. I suspect the private developers will resist it because they don't like extra costs. They don't like spending an extra penny on anything if they don't have to. So I think we have to lead on it, but we have to accept that the numbers that we're going to be building may well be lower than those that we want to build, if that makes sense.
Thanks very much, Councillor Blakey. I think one of the interesting things that came out of the meeting was at the start, when Exeter Living, when they started developing, they were looking at about 20% additional costs. But Tim, John, can you help me here? Is it 5 or 6% now they've got it down to?
Yeah, that's correct. 5 to 6.
So they've said with us catching up with new building methods and actually getting the materials in, the additional costs aren't there as much as they were, say, 10 years ago. So yes, there will be additional costs for it, but I don't believe that it's as high as you're under the impression of, Councillor Blakey. Joe, do you want to come in at that point?
I may just add something to that, Chair, if I could. They've managed to get their build premiums down substantially. That's one of the things that I would like to be able to ask them, is how they've managed to do that. Obviously, there are lifetime savings for us because actually our component turnover would be much, much lower. However, there is also another spanner in the works in that any homes that we would build to passive standard would also be liable for right to buy. So, there's also that to throw in the mix also. They didn't allude to anything to do with, how many of the homes that they've built since they've started doing passive house in 2010. I don't know how many of those units that have subsequently been bought under the right to buy scheme. But that would be kind of interesting to do, bearing in mind that we are in the process of losing probably 70 homes to right to buy over the pandemic period. So that's another thing that we have to consider with that.
Thanks very much. Councillor Arnott, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, very much. Fascinating, all of this. Very, very briefly, just to deal with, and how I miss him as Conservative leader, just to deal with Councillor Moulding's point. I think what was said last night was that this was about getting an agency to provide a service, which is a social service, and that Cabinet and many of its members weren't at ease with that. I don't think what was said, or certainly wasn't meant to be implied, was that this administration is against outsourcing, because otherwise we'd have to shut down the sewers and LED contracts and a number of others instantly. So just for the record on that. And I missed you, Councillor Moulding and Councillor Hall, and indeed Councillor Tom Wright at the extraordinary meeting earlier in the week. I don't know, perhaps it was lodge night. This has been, I've just heard, I think, the most exciting thing I've heard since I've been a member, which is from John Golding. And I'd love to hear more about this, which is the idea of use of our car parks, our assets. That in the 5 minutes, 10 minutes since I put my hand up, I've already imagined every car park in East Devon where we could do something with that. And I can see Tim nodding his head either with "oh my God" or with excitement. But what a game changer that would be. John, yes, you should. But so, I mean, Chair, just throwing it back, using our own land assets, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? I remember, is it Kirsty Allsop, who's been a great advocate for a long time, that every time you give planning permission to a supermarket, you should have a first and second floor above of housing. Why not? Except for the cost. But so that's very interesting. I'd love to hear more of that, in due course. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Armstrong, over to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was just going right back to what Councillor Pook said. I didn't take note of the figures. I must say I've been checking my notes. I didn't take note of the figures he mentioned about the saving of about £1,000 a year on the heating costs. but I'd still like to have that looked at again. I don't care. I know you're probably right, but I just like to check that out again. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
That's
very
all.
much. Councillor Hall, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Really, with what Megan was saying earlier on, what we need to be ensuring that it is evidence-based. I mean, when I became on the district to begin with, housing associations, etc., were looked at being all the rage, and it was seen that they weren't commercially driven, but we know that they needed to make ends meet. And I mean, going through this whole paper for today, what are we actually looking at here? Are we actually looking with this passive housing, we're actually really being the true affordable housing? Because there's no getting away from it. Without actually the land, as Councillor Arnold was saying, we really aren't in a position that you can actually deliver affordable, because the land's the biggest cost that we have to do. And there's one golden thread of all this which needs to be considered, is the climate footprint, as Councillor Davey was saying. And a lot of this discussion is really taking me back to when, on overview, and I know that Debbie's here, is that we've done the massive piece of work, and I know that Councillor Ledger is very much aware of it, about delivering different areas of housing, be it modular, be it self-build, etc. And it seems a lot of this seems to be very similar in the discussions. But my question to you as officers, we as members, I'm hearing that you are very keen to progress this. But do we as members have your assurance that this is really the way to go forward, that we're able to demonstrate that the people we represent and on future housing, that they will be truly affordable housing? Because if not, I feel the only option where we can keep going down, and I'm very proud to be part of the conversation when it says about social housing, because to my mind, that is the only area that we can actually say, with the relative wages in the area, is what the people that I definitely represent, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues, is what everyone's wishing for. Because we actually at the moment, in my mind, have a free tier system. Those who have been forced to buy and that they can buy their own home, those in housing association, and those in social rent. Those in the housing association, where they want to go is into the social council housing. So you can see there's a free tier system. But one thing what we need to be doing is ensure that it's actually consistent across the spectrum, that everybody can live on the wages that they're able to earn in the area. So I really, again, going through you, Chair, is that I as a member and my fellow colleagues being here today, do we have your assurance that this is in what you would say is an area that we need to continue to explore, that will be truly affordable for those people who would potentially be living in these houses? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hall. Joe, you seem like you're ready to come back with an answer to that.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, Ian, yeah, you are kind of preaching to the choir, I think, for a lot of that. We're very passionate about growing our social housing stock. There are many different ways to do it. I think the meeting on Monday was just one illustration of a path that we could go down. It does meet an awful lot of our aspirations. It helps hugely with the poverty agenda, the reduction in fuel poverty especially. It would help with cash flow, because the components of these buildings last for much longer than our standard build quality. But passive house is by no means the only way that we can actually achieve that. There are many other ways that we can do that. Megan and I met with some of our compatriots at Mid Devon this week about a different topic actually, but we ended up talking about their development aspirations. They have lost a similar percentage of their housing stock to right to buy as we have, so about 50%. They're in a very similar position to ourselves with the amount of land holdings that they have. They're quite land poor, like we are. And they've taken the stance that they will be building modular pod homes that are going to be supplied by Z pods. And they are going to be using car parks, leisure spaces, etc. To build those. But what they're going to be doing is they're using the air above those spaces. So they're not going to be losing the car parking spaces. They will be building above them. So Z pods are one of the highest quality of the modular homes, and they are of such good quality that actually Homes England will support using them and will fund them. So we don't have to go directly to Passive House, and I would advise very strongly against not going for the Passive House standard on any of our existing homes, because the cost would be exponential. In our existing homes, we need to be looking to carbon reduce rather than make them carbon neutral. But certainly for any new builds, I think that we should be aiming at it being completely carbon neutral building, because of the benefits that it offers to us in the long term, but also to the tenants living within them. But Passive House is not the only way to do it. Lots of local authorities are looking at it. Advantage Southwest, that we are members of, are just putting together a consortium with a lot of our sort of sister RPs in the Southwest Peninsula, and they're looking at building up a framework of builders and developers that are skilled in using low carbon, Passive House type standard, modular build stuff. Because at the moment, there just isn't that volume down here. So in a minute, all the local authorities, all the RPs, they're all moving towards this carbon neutral housing agenda. But at the moment, we don't have the developers to support that. So ASW are already on the case with that. So they're building that framework of providers for us. So yeah, just wanted to say more than one way to skin a cat. We don't have to necessarily go the full Passive House. There are other stopgap positions.
Thanks very much. So with no other speakers, again, I'm just happy to propose from the chair that we endorse the report and that, yeah, we move on to the next agenda item. So just for members, could you just give us a green tick, red cross, electronic hand for abstain, as before.
Okay, so that's 6 green ticks for, and you have no red crosses at all.
Thank you very much, Alethea. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is over to John Golding to present his report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report, as members can see, attempts to pull together some of the learning and discussion today and facilitate a discussion on the way forward and perhaps try and bring the TAF to some sort of conclusion, obviously acknowledging that there is still some work in progress that the TAF are completing. So some final pieces of investigation that you'll want to take into account. But I've assumed, as you can see in the report, the primary objective is all around increasing the output of affordable and social housing as our main goal, but not forgetting the quality of the end product. So our conversation around Passive House is entirely relevant in that context. And of course, the end product is what, in our case, our tenants live in. So the running costs and all those whole life costs are important to consider. You'll see from my report, and it links in with the points that Ian Hall has just been making. In my view, there's no quick fix here. We've been working at this for some time. We can't flick a switch and suddenly increase the output dramatically. And I would suggest to you that there's no one single delivery model that will address all the the variety of housing needs that we've identified. So I think it's also worth saying, in terms of context, we do achieve a good level of output already with the, if you like, minimal resources that we put into housing enabling. We produce mainly through our partners and through our small programme ourselves, anything between 200 and 300 new affordable homes a year, which obviously helps with the housing needs situation and removing people from the waiting list, dealing with the most acute form of housing, which obviously is homelessness and rough sleeping. So that supply side is absolutely vital to us keeping pace with the needs of our residents. I tried to pick out some learning from the work that the TAF's undertaken. Helpfully, all of the work is carefully recorded. The work of the TAF is all in the minutes and notes of the meeting, so we have a good audit trail. Some of the learning that I've picked out, or if you like, critical success factors that have become evident to me as a result of working through the TAF process. One is a really clear vision about what we want to achieve. All of the housing partners that we've kind of interrogated over the last year or so have had a really clear vision. They have a vision that's supported by a strategy and a business model. That they vary, but that seems to be one ingredient that they all have. There's obviously some real ambition I've picked up from those various organisations that we've spoken to. Political ambition in the case of local authority housing companies, and clear community support for the work that they're undertaking. Another key success factor for me is around investment. We've discovered this product isn't cheap. Often schemes are non-viable. They don't actually stack up and make a profit invariably, especially if you factor in the social purpose and social rents. They invariably don't pay for the cost of development if you're paying market price for land, market price for construction costs. So there's a big investment requirement. The other thing that's become evident is all these organisations have capacity and resources sufficient to deliver their ambitions. So that, again, key success factor. Opportunities are key to success. So things like land, we mentioned Exeter City Living. They have a pipeline of land coming from the council, often preferred partner status. So in the example of Exeter City Living, they are the preferred partner of the housing department in Exeter. That's often helpful in terms of success. Also, all these organisations have what I've referred to as risk appetite. There are real risks in development, and something that perhaps we've been a little bit averse to, risk, but you can't develop without taking a few risks, and maybe we have to think again in terms of increasing our output dramatically about the level of risk that we want to take on. And the final point I'd make in terms of the key success factors, so something around a sustained focus. It's very easy for us in local authorities to have a priority and then something else comes along and there's a new priority. And we have, as a council, for a number of years had the delivery of housing a priority. And I think the organisations that have been successful have retained that drive, if you like, in terms of their priorities. Again, for me, the sessions with Tor Vista and Exeter City Living, so Tor Vista being the Tor Bay housing company, were particularly enlightening and has caused me to reflect on our own venture into the world of housing companies. And some of those success ingredients that I mentioned above when we look back, we've not invested, we've not created a pipeline of opportunity. There are perhaps lessons to be learned if we're to really up our output of affordable and social housing. The need is undoubtedly there. We've got lots of evidence of the need to do this. Evidence such as the Cabinet report last evening in terms of homelessness increases, our housing registers increased consistently, and we're not able to. So demand has gone up, the supply has not matched the demand. So there's a really good justification to take forward the work of the TAF in a rigorous way. I'm sure there's other learning points, and part of the purpose of this paper was to provide some discussion points, perhaps some controversy that you'd wish to debate. But I'm hoping in section 3 of the report, I'm being quite clear and honest with the TAF in terms of, if we are to make this step change in delivery, we need to invest in this, and not just accept that this is another thing on the to-do list, but really make a statement, if you like, because I don't think we're going to deliver otherwise. Interested in what Simon was saying about, I think again he's reflected on the housing company. I think we set it up, we had lots of ambition, we got all the processes in place. We never appointed anybody into that company to drive the company. I got moved on to other work as climate change came up, poverty comes up, and that kind of ambition is never really matched. And one of the things I would urge the council not to do is to fall foul of that. Again, I think we have to effectively put our money where our mouth is if we're going to make this much needed step change. So to pick up on that, and so I don't ramble on too long, I've put forward a series of, I called them recommendations, but again, I suppose they're debating points that pick up on that. So I know we've bandied about, a few people have talked about a task force of some description, or a project team, or whatever you like to call it, but there needs to be some sort of group that oversees delivery that's not distracted onto other areas of council business. So it probably means employing people for the purpose of delivering, the sole purpose of delivering affordable housing. We need a kind of project manager. We can buy in support, which it seems like a lot of the embryonic housing companies do. So have a core staff, but buy in consultancy support until there's a big enough momentum behind the company. So I've talked about that. I've talked about some additional enabling officers who can work with those registered providers to ensure that their output is as high as possible as well. We probably need to look at our interaction with planning. You know, if we was to re-establish the housing company, then we'd wish to be preferred partner for the housing company. We would perhaps wish to have a preferred partner arrangement with the housing revenue account. We do have a modest development fund in the housing revenue account that we put aside for this sort of initiative. But again, hopefully I'm quite clear in the report that there are many demands on that fund, including decarbonisation of the stock, upgrading the stock, compliance type issues, building safety. There are many demands on that fund, and it will quickly run out. It won't sustain a long-term pipeline of schemes. And in fact, one of the drivers for Exeter City Living was because the Exeter housing revenue account ran out of borrowing capacity. So you can borrow on a housing revenue account, but it's limited, and you obviously need the ability to pay to pay that money back. So those are some ideas really to drive this forward. It's not a complete menu. They need to be worked up in perhaps in significantly more detail. But I think the overriding point is this is not cheap. We need to invest in it if we're to make that step change from circa, say, 250 homes a year to something like 500. That's our ambition. We need to have a dedicated group of people, either within, say, housing or in Tim's world or in a company that sole purpose is to drive that development. That's what I've seen from some of the organisations that we've talked about. So happy to discuss that in more detail. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, John. Really appreciated. So, members, does anyone wish to comment on the report? Don't all jump at once.
I have, Chair.
Councillor Pluke, over to you.
Sorry.
Thank you. I've read the report, but I'm sort of, it's the first of the task groups which I've been involved in. So I did a bit of reading beforehand and a bit of thinking about it, and I've read the report, and there's lots of things which chime with. But what I'd like to do is sort of go through and sort of make sure I've got a better understanding, and maybe if I summarise some of the things which I've been thinking about, we can come to a conclusion where we actually get some action and do something, as opposed to identifying what we're trying to do all the time and all our aspirations, but don't actually get anything. Now I know, if Simon's still there, I'll get accused of being a bit simplistic sometime and a bit basic in my approach. But I'll go back to what I've said to when I've been advising housing groups. Housing, it needn't be that difficult. It's a business, as long as we look at it as a business and we look at the practical and the financial elements. It's not that difficult. I think sometimes we make the difficulties ourselves as opposed to them being real difficulties. And going back to all the aspirations we've been talking about passive house and car parks, retaining car parks and doing this, we've got to remember that whatever aspirations we sign up to achieve, nothing will be achieved until the first house is actually delivered. So, we've got to start, that's got to be the key criteria. So, and I've got a bit of a script here because otherwise I'll forget everything. So first of all, I looked at what is our objective, and I was pleased to see that quite a lot of these tune with what John was saying. But do we want to own and develop a housing asset? Do we need to make the surplus and profit, or just to cover costs? To deliver the appropriate housing for the social afforded rent. So we've got to get, what sort of housing are we looking at, social or affordable? In effect, I think good affordable housing is social housing. We've got the shared ownership. You mustn't forget that, because there's a lot of people who aspire to get on the housing ladder, and shared ownership is seen as a win for them, but it's also a win for us because it's bringing capital back in, which can be fed back in. We can also say that, do we want to be managers of other rental housing? Because, we've got a big organisation here that can manage rental. We could actually push up the qualities of rental, because I've heard one thing said before was to be a model landlord in price and quality. Well, we can be a model landlord and price and quality on our own houses, but we can also, take on the management of others and deliver that. So then we get to start looking at the delivery, the existing, where's the site going to come from, existing HRA or EDDC. We mustn't miss out the market price sites. Market price sites might be the only opportunity in some cases, but all we want to do is just make sure we can afford it, and there are ways of making that affordable. But as long as we model it first, we understand where costs are going and where income can come in. Exception sites, we can, those are very, very important, especially for the villages. And then what size of development are we talking about? Are we talking about the 50 units above, 20 units above, 10 units above? In the rural areas, are we looking at only doing a sort of six to 15 houses, typical exception sizes? Or are we looking at the sort of the rural infills, the that are requested by a community? They've got a small bit of land, a farmer's looking to offload it relatively cheaply, but they don't know how to get it developed. These are sorts of things we should be looking at as well. The delivery method, are we looking at being the developer, employing architects and project managers and contractors? Maybe down the road, but perhaps what we should be looking at is working with a developer where we influence and we push and we direct and we get our money's worth out, but the developer takes on the build functions, because that's their job. That's what they do. And don't be afraid of, oh sorry, I got a landline going. Don't be afraid of letting the developer get a profit. I'll just cancel that. It's probably Amazon telling me something like that. I'll keep talking anyway. Don't be afraid of letting the developer make a profit, because if the developer's not making a profit, we're not going to get an efficient service from him. Where does I get to? And then there is always the opportunity where we could sort of say, with experience, we could be the developer and employ our own in-house design and project manager. But that's a long way down the line. We just haven't got the experience to do that. We haven't got the size to do it, and we certainly haven't got the time for it. On finance, look at where we're going to provide the development capital. Are we actually talking about real cash, or are we sort of, if we're going in shares, we can use put our capital in the value of the site. Or we could just say do an agreement where we don't actually have to put any money in to start off with, but we agree a purchase value for completed units. Don't forget all the grant support. We mentioned Public Works Loans Board. Cross-subsidising, I think cross-subsidising for market houses, because majority of sites are going to have some market houses on them. Don't be afraid to look at the market houses and let them cross-subsidise and support the affordable houses. And as I said, the shared equity serves two things: affordability and bringing money in. And then don't be afraid of any long-term loans which are serviced by the rental income. And so, what structure? Parts are within EDDC. Is it part of the HRA with a housing officer, totally or partially assigned, or within a wholly owned company with an officer supported on secondment, or within a wholly owned company with a commercially targeted incentivized management? So, bearing in all those in mind, I sort of came to a couple of suggestions. One is that we have a bit of a phased approach. We don't try and bite off the whole bar at one go. And remember that fundamentally the council should be an enabler or a supporter, and to get these things going. We have commercial organisations which do things anyway. So I don't think we should be the direct implementer or builder. So to say where, in my opinion, we could actually get things going quite quickly, within EDDC, we can have a small group, and I saw this in John's report. He's got needing someone there. We do need to get someone who can be focused, identify market and EDD sites, or an existing developer who we can work with, someone who can actually talk with these people and work, find a site we can do. Because my experience is you can talk as much as you want, but until you've actually got a site with a name on it, a boundary, a number of units, a type of cost, you're going to get nowhere, because you can't. The actual reality can't be envisaged. Because I don't think we should go down. We should jump fully in, because we just haven't got the experience, and we need to learn from this. As a first project, develop an arrangement with a developer where we're working with him. He's making a profit, and we're getting our houses out of it, through the affordable elements, or through a total share where we actually get benefit from the market sales as well. We can then review this, and then further development could be on the basis more like the Exeter scheme, where EDDC becomes a developer, as I said above. I don't think we should be employing too many of our own people. I think we should be the EDC company should be standalone, and it should be using consultants. But concurrent with this, not concurrent 5 years down the road, but concurrent with identifying sites, we should be going out to the communities, and these are the smaller rural communities, because I hear them all the time, who are wanting to get small sites going, and offer sort of community-led housing schemes, offering them support, technical and financial. And, you know, okay, the BSCLT is exactly along that line. We go along to Simon with a proper costed out scheme and show how it can work, how EDDC can have the security and provide the money and get some income, and the houses are provided in the community. And alongside this, you know, in the meantime, let's start developing some flexible models to get proof of concept, because I go back to it all the time. Unless we actually get some models and sort of show how an old scheme we could have done an old scheme with real prices, or we could look at some new bits of land, just pick any bit of housing land and actually build up a scheme, we aren't going to really see. So, yeah, you know, going back to my first thing, yes, you know, Simon's going to say I'm very simplistic, and I just say go ahead and do it. But, you know, basically, unless you actually do something and start it, you won't get anywhere. So that's the way. I thoroughly endorse John's idea. Get someone in, a senior, at a relatively senior level in a standalone housing company with commercial and technical and development experience. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pook. Councillor Pook, there was a few proposals there. Do you think you could just quickly summarise them? Because I know Alethea is probably scribbling them down frantically. I believe those are proposals, weren't they? You're on mute right now. You're on mute. Councillor Pook, you're on mute.
I'm so good at muting myself so the dogs and phones don't annoy people. Identify some sites, EDDC, market, existing developer sites, just getting information which we know together. Identify some sites, we've got some people to talk to. Either develop at one of those sites, but more likely develop an arrangement with a developer, and find out how we could work with them so that some of those houses could be developed. The affordable ones could come in, not being given to another housing association or he's developing on. We take them on and they become EDDC housing company houses. We need to review that, and then the second stage on would be, you know, going a wholehearted, which we'll call it today, want for a better word, the Exeter City model. But in the meantime, go out to all our communities, find these rural sites which are not wanting development, and see how many of those would really thrive from good input from the council and from community-led advisors. I know one actually, accredited as well. And in the meantime, start developing models, because, you know, Simon knows the sort of models I do. They aren't that complex. They're just, you know, spreadsheets which grow like Topsy a bit, but they do sort of, so you can put so much in, and we can actually see what will happen, and you start really envisaging it and making things real. That's it. Make it real, it will happen. Always imagine it, and it'll stay in imagination. Thank you.
Chair, I think a real point of order from outside the committee, if I can help you. I think what Councillor Pook has just done brilliantly is repeat his previous speech. So do you not just need to adopt the recommendations from John Golding, and then what Jeff has just said comes into the group when it first meets? I'm just trying to suggest how you get through the recommendations. Forgive me if I got that wrong.
It's a case of whether Councillor Pook wishes to take on he's happy to take on John's recommendations as a starter, and then bolt on his recommendations to it as well.
No, I think that's basically it. Agree John's recommendations, but to actually get some real action moving on you know, so we can come to another meeting with a sort of some models and some ideas, so people can understand what's actually going to happen, what could be delivered.
Thank you. So that's a proposal there. Can I please get a seconder?
Excuse me, Chair, I'm not sure what we're agreeing here. I've got some questions about what Councillor Pook has just said, and I've got questions about
getting a seconder right now, Councillor Armstrong. So it's.
Well, I've got
you've
questions
made a
about John's report as well.
You'll still get a chance to agree. I've had a proposal. I need to
So
get a
what are we-
seconder for it,
so
and
what's
then
the
we go back
propo-
into debate.
Could you just tell me what the proposal is, please?
So it's to accept all of John's recommendations with the additions of Councillor Pooks that he listed.
Well, no, I can't agree to that because we haven't debated it yet. We haven't debated it.
We're not going to a vote yet, Councillor Armstrong. I'm just asking for a seconder right now.
Okay, all right.
Councillor Blakey, is that you seconding?
It is, yes.
Thanks very much. Okay, so Councillor Hall, over to you to continue the debate.
Thank you, Chair. And listening to Councillor Pook, who he did actually make a very valid point. It's not free. Housing providers, there's actually 5 when you look at it by private rent, housing association, East Devon District Housing Stock, and of course the shared ownership, which is a good thing for many. I mean, I should have supposed to declare that I'm a Housing Review Board member as well and have been since 2015. From what Joe was saying earlier on, we've lost 70 this year, so that means we're at the number of 4,130. Now, I'm always trying to look at everything from the lens of those people we represent. And when we're actually looking at something like this, we've really got to ensure that we're not biting off more than we can chew. And fundamentally, one of the threads is that we need to be building sustainable, resilient communities. And again, going back to what I said previously, when we're actually having to consider every single step, and quite rightly too, the climate. But with what John's report is, I agree with the majority of John's report, even though it comes as no surprise to John for many, many years, and it won't come as a surprise to Megan. I get a little bit frustrated because we're always looking at it on those 5 ways of developing areas for people to live in East Devon. We are looking at it through what are we actually doing and trying to do at the moment. Are we looking primarily at housing association, or are we looking at increasing our housing stock, or a little bit of both? Now, to be perfectly honest, I've got no problem at all of amending Councillor Poot's proposal, reverting back to the original recommendations from John, is that we take away the affordable housing, and we have a plan for increasing outputs of social housing. Let's get that right, and then we can build upon this. And at the same time, we can look at what best practice is. But as it's been said already, until we actually deliver a house, we've done nothing. All we've done is talk, like we have in the past about the housing company. And then we had an overview task, which used a huge amount of officer time, and we delivered nothing. But what the lens of the people I represent, I don't think anyone would disagree with the concept of increasing the East Devon District Council housing stock as a social landlord. And that is the area I'm coming from on this. Yes, there are complexities in it. Yes, there are areas of land that could be available. And as the leader already said, I'm not saying I agree with him, but when he's talking about areas of car parks for such areas, okay, that could be considered. But what we need to do is literally, this is an elephant. It always has been. And I've always been told if it's an elephant, there's only one way you're going to go about it, is by just one bite at a time. So again, for you, Chair, I would like to go back to the original proposals on all the points, and all the way through that point of documentate on the document, primarily starting at 4.1. The second bullet point is remove the word affordable, and let's just concentrate on the social housing aspect of what we're trying to do here. And then we can build up the momentum, and then we can consider going forward what we can do in getting the right experts in to able to develop further. Because who knows, there could be landowners out there who could really like this concept, that they are actually helping building our resilient communities. But what they don't want it to do is go to any other enterprise, but for the good people of this area and those people who join us from other areas. So I think with my amendment, I hope that could be considered, but I would be asking for a seconder on that one, Chair.
It's exactly what I was just about to ask for, and Councillor Moulding looks like he's just about to unmute. There you go, you've got a second with Councillor Moulding. So we'll take the amendment first. Councillor Arnott, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, not on the committee, so thank you for enabling me to speak. I thought that was a magnificent contribution from Jeff, from Councillor Pook. I think the main recommendation that John's making is the creation of a housing task force, isn't it? That's the thing. So that you are going from today to cabinet and saying, let's get on with this thing. At which I would hope that Councillor Pook, everything he said, and he might want to play a leading role in that, comes in. I think the essence of what he said was actually, with respect, the very opposite of what Councillor Hall has just said. What Jeff has tried to say is we need to look at all of these models. Now, I was very struck. I had a meeting the other day with the leader and CEO of Exeter. And Phil Bialik, as leader of Exeter, he was making a good Labour man, sort of to the left as well, union leader. He was saying what his kids want, his own children want, is they don't necessarily, well, I shouldn't identify what they want. There are a number of people of that generation in their 30s who actually want to own their own homes as well. That's what they want. They don't wish to be in social housing for all their lives. They wish to get on the ladder, for want of a better term. But there is absolutely nothing in their range being built at the moment. Their range being, that let's say there's two of you, if you're lucky in a relationship, you might be able to scramble together enough to sustain a mortgage for between 150 and 200. Good luck finding anything anywhere around here for that. So I think that's the virtue of what Jeff is suggesting, is that you can enable a lot of these schemes by allowing for market housing as well, albeit if it's in some way subsidised or enabled, so it's below the actual market price. And I just think that's incredibly important. The other thing which keeps coming back, doesn't it, is what envelope, if we do get involved in this, we can use to protect it from the right to buy legislation. How can we do that? And that's going to be critical, isn't it, as well? I think it's great that this conversation is being had now, because presumably this then will feed into the local plan discussion as well. So it's going to be an essential part, isn't it? And finally, Chair. So I mean, I'm not on this committee, but I suspect the original recommendations do the trick today. But there we go. And you don't need to include Jeff's right now, because they can come in at the next meeting. And I'm going out now to have a look at the Collerton car park. Actually, I'm really not. Please don't tell anybody in Collerton I'm going to look at the Collerton car park. But you see what I mean. I think our own land assets are a very interesting prospect, not just car parks. Thank you, Chair.
Just to remind Councillor Arnold, we are recording and live on YouTube, and this will be available for eternity to come.
There are thousands watching in Collerton now, I'm sure.
There'll be a line of pitchforks chasing you out of Collerton High Street. Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Armstrong, over to you.
Well, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just getting to John's report, I just wanted to ask him to clarify the difference between the Social Housing Task Force and the Social Housing Delivery Group, and how they link together, and who would be on each of those. What would be the purpose of each of them? I know the task force, you talk about having a project manager, but I just wondered what the difference is basically, and how they would work together. That's my first, and then I've got another question about Jeff Pook's suggestions as well.
Can you ask them both now, and then I'll bring in John at the end.
All right, okay. Yeah, so the other one is basically, I'm following up from what Councillor Hall said about the affordable. So I agree with that. And I do have real concerns, and I know it depends what model we take and all of that, but I have real concerns about including any market housing. And I know Councillor Pook will probably come straight back, and some others of you will say, well, it's not possible if we don't have some market housing. Well, you know, I think we have to think about that seriously. And the aim of this, the aim that I have always had throughout since 2015, is we need more social housing. We need more social housing. I can't say that longly and strongly enough. And however that happens, that's what the purpose should be. And you know, that's it. Affordable. I'm not that. You know, we have affordable all the time, and we've got lots of it from other registered providers. So it's a social housing that we need. It may not be possible without market and without affordable housing, but I think if you don't aim high, you don't get anywhere. That's what we should be aiming for. That's the purpose of what we're here for. That's my view. I'm only one person, I know, but I think Councillor Hall agrees with me on that one, and I would still say that. So I certainly agree with his amendment to remove affordable. So that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong, just on that point, if we were to say, and completely hypothetical, I'm just trying to gauge your response, would be if we were to say on a scheme deliver 3 market housing and then that led to the development of another 3 social housing which wouldn't be delivered otherwise, would you not be for that if it's over and above what the scheme would deliver otherwise?
I think I'd need more information about it. It's a possibility, but it just worries me. It just really worries me. And I know it may not be possible to do it without market housing, without affordable housing. But I just don't know. I may well agree to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's difficult to say without more information. Yeah.
Of course.
I think Jo wants to say something. I don't know what she wants. She probably disagrees with me.
John, can I bring Jo, John, can I bring either of you in at this point? I know you've both been asked questions.
Yeah, I was just... Sorry, John, do you want to go first? Carry on.
Well, I'll pick up on the specific question that Councillor Armstrong asked around the difference between these groups. So these are just concepts at this stage that I'm throwing out there for discussion. But the way I see it at the moment for developing, the social housing task forces are a kind of officer group, maybe with some secondments, as I mentioned, maybe with some direct appointments. The difference between that and what I've referred to as a social housing delivery group, that brings in the members, so conscious that members are really all over this. It's a priority for the council. Members will want some sort of involvement and can help drive this initiative, this priority of the council. So that would be a member group that perhaps this TAF transforms into in due course to oversee the delivery of affordable housing. I've been quite careful in the report referring to affordable / social housing for a reason, and the main difference between the two is the rents that are charged. Social housing rents being much cheaper than affordable housing rents, which typically the RPs, the bigger housing association, charge. They charge those higher rents to make the schemes viable. So with the cost of land, the cost of construction and borrowing, often even at affordable rents without grant from government, the schemes don't stack up. So it's very laudable to have an aspiration to deliver social housing, but in doing so, what we need to recognise is that the likelihood is that we're going to have to subsidise that housing much more because it don't stack up financially with other factors. But if that's our aspiration, and we can deliver that. Just while I've got the mic, Chair, I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Hall said, and I've written it down. Said we've delivered nothing. I should just reiterate really in the report that we deliver 250 to 300 new affordable homes a year. That's quite a considerable output. Most of that comes through housing associations. What we're looking for here, my understanding is a real step change in that output. So that output's good, but we want to be even better. And so that's why we're searching for a new delivery model. And again, you're seeing embedded in the report, my advice is that we adopt a range of delivery models. And we looked at those right early on in the TAF. I can't remember which TAF, the first or second TAF, that Tim produced a range of delivery models. And my suggestion to the TAF is that we wouldn't shut our door on any of those delivery models. If they deliver the ambition that we're seeking to deliver, then I think we need to embrace a range of delivery models and use the one that suits the circumstances most appropriately. Thank you.
Chair, as I was named Chair, may I?
I'm just going to take it from go back to Joe quickly, Ian, and then I'll come back to you. So Joe,
Yeah.
after you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Just to say that obviously I'm a bit poacher turned gamekeeper here. I was housing director for Home Group for nearly 20 years before I came over to EDDC. So just to kind of offer some comfort to Megan, I think really, in actually using market sale properties to support the delivery of social housing units is what RPs do. Within Home Group, we had to rapidly change our stance as the grant that was attracted by social housing units dropped. So we had to clearly move our build schedules. What we used to do was, we were very lucky, we did a lot of land banking back in the day, so we used to build in the southeast, sell those for direct sale, and then we would use the receipts from those to then go and build our social housing aspirations. So it is a really recognised thing, and it may well be the way that we can. It may well be the only way we can afford to do it, unless we're going to massively increase our borrowing. So yeah, so just you know, it is a recognised model that a lot of people use, and it does kind of work. Home Group is still is a not-for-profit organisation, so a bit like the Exeter City Living, profit for purpose. So every single bit of our money was rolled back into building the social housing. We were still are one of the top 10 housing providers in the country. We're in the top 10 of housing delivery. So it's a recognised, very successful model. So.
Chair, can I just come back on that just very quickly?
Megan, sorry, I need to go back to Ian Hall first because he was just been mentioning.
Okay. Yeah, so, I just want to respond to what Joe's just said. Yeah. Councillor
Hall, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep my hand up, and I know that when the debate's finished, you'll give me a chance to sum up for the amendment. Really, John, you know that obviously I respect everything what you've done, and I've listened intently over the years. And I do very much, I'm in favour of what's happened over the last year regarding the delivery of affordable housing, which is the word affordable has been debated ever since and far before I became an elected member. No doubt that will always continue when we're looking at areas what are going to be developed. But when I will come and sum up, this is the increasing output of social housing, which is the thread which has been missing for a very, very long time. The actual delivery of affordable housing, say, for instance, on an area which is coming forward on a HELA, yes, on affordable. But this is an area that could be delivered on social housing. And the areas where I'm primarily thinking of here is what East Devon District Council have presently under their ownership or alternatives that they can actually use flexible spaces, as Councillor Arnott was alluding to earlier on, not saying I'm in favour of it. So I hope that clears up that point. The world doesn't stop spinning. Yes, these areas would always be delivered, but a plan for increasing outputs of social housing is exactly the lens what the people I represent would be thinking. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hall. Megan, can I bring you back in now?
Yeah, just very quickly. I agree with just everything that Ian said, and I know that that's the model that's usually used. I understand all that. You know, there has to be some to buy and some market, all that. All I'm asking is, can we look to see if there's any way that we don't have to do that all the time? That's it. And one of the ways is, what Councillor Hall has just mentioned, is where we own our own land. You know, surely on our own land, could that not just all be social? Or are we still up against it? I mean, I don't know enough about it, obviously, but I think we just need to explore it and keep that focus on the social housing, as Councillor Hall has said. Keep that focus there. That's what we're actually wanting to get out of this. And I know you've done it for years, Joe, and John's got experience. So I think my battery's going to go in a minute, so I'll just plug in. But thank you, Chair, for bearing with me. I'll shut up now and let somebody else speak.
Thanks very much, Councillor Armstrong. I think for Megan and Ian, both we are trying to, that is the end goal, is to improve the output of social housing in the district. But we just don't wish to tie our arms behind our backs by discounting other delivery models. The key aim and aspiration is to increase that output. I want to be aspirational and look to John's team, basically, to be delivering 350 houses per year that are social and affordable each year. That's what we are doing through East Devon. That's a big aim to start delivering it, but it's something that I believe that their team can do if we give them the ability to do it and don't tie their arms behind their backs. They need to be allowed the freedom and the models to do whatever they can to get to the aim and the aspiration. Councillor Davey, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Well, you've kind of summed up my first point, actually. I don't think we should get drawn into a kind of debate between social versus affordable versus market housing. I think we've got to retain some flexibility here and recognise that delivery models will vary, possibly site by site. Yes, as you say, the ultimate aim is more social housing, but we're losing social housing all the time as well because of right to buy, and social housing is, well, for the foreseeable future, going to be subject to that. And affordable housing, yeah, it's not affordable for everybody, but it does answer a need, or it appears to, and it can answer that aspiration for people to own. And even having some market housing in the mix, if it's a development that we're producing, at least we'd have some control over where that is, on the location of it, on the quality of it, and the nature of the development. Wouldn't it be lovely if we were talking about pepper potting the market housing among the affordable and social housing rather than the other way round? So, you know, I really don't want to rule anything out, and I've read through John's recommendations several times. There's one or two that I still don't totally understand, but I think what it seems to summarise as that none of this is going to happen unless we have the resources within the council. We've got some specific projects that we get going on. As Jeff Pook said, you know, until we start laying bricks, we're not doing anything apart from talking. I think Ian said the same thing. We need some land, and we need funding. And I think that's what John has tried to summarise and to suggest that we get on with. And absolutely, let's get on with it. And he also talks about, you know, the appetite for risk. Well, I think we might have to take a few risks here, but risk can be managed, and it can be assessed. And finally, car parks. I'd never thought of them. as a way of possibly having your cake and eating it. Especially when I just googled at Simon's suggestion the Z pods, and yeah, there they are. They produced one specifically to build over car parks. So that could be a way that we retain the car parks and enable ourselves to have some housing. I'll nominate a London Inn car park in Exmouth, right in the middle of Exmouth, right next to the shopping centre, and crying out for a nice little development scheme there. People have talked about having supermarkets and offices and things there with parking underneath, but why not housing? Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Councillor Davey. Joe, you want to come back in at that point?
Just to say, obviously, with the right to buy thing, there is the other side to right to buy, in that therefore the more homes we sell, the more money we have got to spend. And although a lot of those parameters have now shifted, so they're more generous in our favour, we do still have a significant number of receipts that have to be spent. But also we do have to be a bit mindful that it's not just a case of any piece of land we're going to stick a house on it, because we do also need to follow our housing needs assessments. So it might well be that we do end up building over car parks in Exmouth, because by far our greatest housing need is within Exmouth. So, you never know.
Thanks very much, Joe. Councillor Moulding, over to you. I see you're getting brought tea and biscuits.
Yes, Chair. Well, I'm really wanting to just elaborate on why I chose to second Councillor Hall's amendment, which I think is important. On my screen, I'm looking at 4.1 on John Golding's report, and the very first bullet point is the creation of a social housing task force. Not social and affordable housing task force. During that, those items, on a number of occasions, we have social/affordable. And I think that's what Ian Hall is saying at this stage. Let's concentrate on social housing, because that is our objective. And firstly, as the report says, we need to establish the officer structure and the member structure for going forward with a social housing task force. Now, I think Councillor Pook spoke brilliantly, and all the things that he mentioned would come as an addendum to the 4.1 objectives that John Golding has put forward, and Councillor Pook's addendum will then contribute to the systems, the strategies, the procedure, and the delivery of the end product. And that may very well include affordable housing. It may even include some market force housing to help with the delivery. But I think initially, as has been said by, I think it was Councillor Davey, ultimately, we want to deliver social housing. Now, affordable housing and market force housing may be a contribution towards that, but at this stage, that must be our priority. So I think that's why I'm seconding the amendment, and I hope the amendment goes forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moulding. Just for clarity for everyone, if we are solely focused on social housing, it does take out the option of what Exeter City Living were doing, where they deliver affordable rent rates, but it is comparable or even cheaper than social rates due to the build quality of it. And that's just the point that I want to get across, so all members are aware. Councillor Pook, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly on the amendments and things. I'm not great on all the structure of amendments and things, but basically, yeah, John's. I'm quite happy if mine are more sort of addendums to that, because John set out a better structure for it to happen, and mine are maybe more action points. Anyway, the main thing I want to say now is I think we've got to stop getting hung up on these titles, affordable housing and social housing. Basically, if we should, what I think we all worry about is housing within the HRA, which is going to be subject to potential right to buy, and housing which we own, and we can set whatever rent we want. We can set a market rent, we can set an affordable rent, we can set an equivalent of a social rent. But we can decide that based on how much money we've got and how much how many houses we want to deliver. So let's just say we want to deliver houses which we can control the rent level on, and then we can have our model which can say either, because actually going back to Hose England, they specify the houses have got to be 80% of market rent, but they can be lower than that. So you can go down to 60, 65, 70%, in which case you are at what we're calling social rent. So I'd just like to get over that. This title of social rent, social and affordable, is really confusing. Well, to me it is. What I say is we just want housing in the NRA, in the HRA, which might be bought out by someone, or we want housing which we own and control, and we can control forever. And that's basically it. So just don't get hung up on the titles.
Very much, Councillor Pook. I don't think we need any more housing for the National Rifle Association. Councillor Arnott, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, I'm very alarmed by this Corbynite turn of events from Councillor Moulding and Councillor Hall. Let's say in a parallel universe that this was still a Conservative authority, it would be the only one in England that wasn't wanting to get involved with a wide range of housing models and insisted only in building sort of Stalinist era tower blocks for the people of East Devon to live in. So I think I get what they're saying, but with respect, if I were on the committee, I wouldn't be voting for it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Arnott. Tim, can I come to you next?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I'd, as an officer, recommend okay. The focus is on providing social housing, but to deliver that, we mustn't preclude other forms of housing. We have spoken as a member working group out of this TAF, we've met with two different authorities, two different organisations. Exeter Living, only this week, they cannot do it at social rents, so it has to be affordable. Whilst we've been talking, I've just been skimming back through the minutes from the debate that followed the meeting with Torbay and Tor Vista Homes. I can't see it in the minutes, but I'm pretty sure, colleagues can correct me, perhaps if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, that it's, again, they are affordable because they can't make it stack up for social. So we've got the two other organisations that we've spoken to as part of the TAF saying it has to be, you have to include a degree of what it has to be affordable. I think therefore it would be dangerous for us now to think that we can make something stack up that others haven't, and I wouldn't want to preclude our ability to ultimately, as Councillor Pook has said, to actually start building. I think that the objective of all of this, I think what I'm hearing is very clearly to provide social housing, but to do so, we need the tool. Well, we need to be blunt. We need the tools to be able to do so, and that will include that. I suspect will include affordable and probably other forms of housing as well. So I think there are two different elements. It's the primary objective of what we're trying to achieve, which is one thing, but then how we achieve it, not precluding those other options. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Tim. I think it is just about delivering a model that's workable for officers so that they actually deliver, and that we're not in the same position that we found ourselves with the housing company, where officers have got their hands behind their backs and they're not able to make everything stack up. And again, it doesn't deliver. So Councillor Hall, we'll go to you to sum up your amendment.
Thank you, Chair. And it's been a good debate this afternoon, really. And really, when we're actually looking at this, what we do know, we do have the opportunity and we do own certain amounts of pieces of land in the East Devon area. We do know that we got £3 million in the kitty, correct me if I'm wrong, on the HRA, and which should actually give us the borrowing powers as well. We've also got to be considering here, as far as I can see, we've been going through a really, really trying period during a pandemic. We do also realise that all our officers have been quite stretched, and we've got to keep that in mind. And I'm very, very mindful that we do not want to ourselves or collectively. And we've got to make sure that we're able to deliver on whatever the outcome on this amendment is from myself. And please let me reiterate, and I'm quite happy with Councillor Pook's areas to be an addendum to what I'm saying as an amendment, because I feel at the forefront of this, the forefront is a plan for increasing outputs of social housing. Again, I will reiterate one final time that this is from the lens of the people I represent, and I know colleagues have represented for many, many a year. This doesn't exclude other areas of delivery, because if there is any housing what comes forward on areas like Healer, then that 25% affordable will be obviously included on any planning application. That will be considered on its merits. But we do have an opportunity, and it's a bite at a time. And through that, I don't see why at the moment we need to take care of all this in one hit. Let's break it down. And with the addendum from Councillor Pook's comments, I think this is achievable. I think it's palatable. And I think the members of East Devon District Council would, I hope, be in a majority in favour of this. Because we're not actually cutting our nose off here and actually restricting ourselves. And as you said, Chair, tying the officers' hands behind their back, I don't get that. Because as I've said before, we've been here with the housing company before, we've been here with the overview TAF. So all I am saying in absolutely point blank terms, a plan for increasing outputs of social housing with an addendum of Councillor Pook's comments being included. Thank you very much. And I'd like it to go to the vote, please.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hall, and that's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to go to the vote now. So just for clarity, we're voting on Councillor Hall's amendment first. So could all members either give us a green tick or red cross?
Okay, Chair, I see that we've got one person abstaining. We've got 2 green ticks and 3 red crosses, so it's not carried.
Thank you very much. So then that falls and we move to Councillor Pook's original motion. And could we then take that to a vote? So again, green ticks for yes, red crosses for no, electronic hands for abstaining.
So, Chair, there are 4 green ticks and 2 red crosses.
Thank you very much. So that's passed. I just need to find my script. So with that brings our Housing TAF meeting to an end. I would like to thank everyone, including members of the public, for their attendance. Members, can I remind you that until the Democratic Service Team confirms that the live streaming recording is stopped, you can still be heard and any comments made may be recorded. Thank you very much, Will.